All right, the recording is started. So good morning. Thank you for joining this feedback session for the Maryland Heating Fuel Provider Reporting Program. My name is Cameron Arnstein, and I'm a policy analyst with Maryland Department of the Environment's Climate Change Program, supporting the Clean Heat Rules outreach. I will be moderating this morning's session. We're joined today by the Director of MDE's Air and Radiation Administration, Chris Hoagland.
All right. Thanks, Cameron. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We really value the feedback from everyone here on the line as we design this program. Looking forward to today's session. Thanks.
Also joining us is the manager of MDE's Climate Change Program, Mark Stewart.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
And in a moment, I'll turn it over to Dr. Zach Barzola, the Building Decarbonization Section Head with the Climate Change Program. Zach will be leading today's presentation and is here to answer questions you may have following the presentation.
Morning, everyone. It's good to be here with you today.
So the agenda for this feedback session consists of a presentation from MDE on the Maryland Heating Fuel Provider Reporting Program. We are also releasing a feedback form today to gather feedback on the program. There will be a portion for live Q&A and open discussion after the presentation. This session will be recorded to capture everyone's feedback, and the presentation portion will be posted online. We will share a link to the slides and a feedback form after today's session via email. The chat is currently disabled, but if you have questions or would like to submit written feedback, you can submit them in the Q&A feature in the bottom right-hand corner on the screen. It looks like 9 dots in a square. Click there and you'll see Q&A. We'll work to address these questions submitted in the Q&A towards the end of the session as time allows. All right, let's get started with MD's presentation on the Maryland Heating Fuel Provider Reporting Program. And for that, I will turn it over to Dr. Zach Barzola.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Before I dive into the content of this presentation, I wanted to provide a little bit of background. If you all joined us in the fall, then we shared at that time an outline for the Heating Fuel Reporting Program in a webinar. And we're kind of diving in a little bit deeper today to share some additional details and then seeking your feedback as we move to implement this program. And we already appreciate much of the feedback we received in the fall. We've been thinking about that, incorporating some of those changes as we've moved to this point in the program. And so I wanted to mention as well that this is a first look at what we've been developing for you all, really in a little bit more detail. And we really want to hear from you, as Chris said, the key stakeholders involved. So we look forward to your feedback on the stakeholder preview, as it's going to help us improve the rulemaking as we move forward in that process. And just to reiterate, this is not your only time to provide input on this, but we appreciate your early input as we work to shape this. So let's dive in. What is the purpose of this program? The purpose of the program is to establish quarterly reporting requirements for heating fuel providers of the amount of heating fuel delivered for final sale or consumption in Maryland. This reporting framework will improve upon data used to support the department's triennial statewide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. This inventory is required by Maryland Code Environment Article 2-1203. Data collected under this program will also inform future programs to meet the state's legal requirements to reduce statewide greenhouse gas emissions by 60% below 2006 levels by 2031 and to achieve net zero statewide greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. So what is a heating fuel that's going to be reported under this program? It's any material substance, whether solid, liquid, or gaseous, that can be used to supply heat to a building. It includes biofuels, biomethane, coal, hydrogen fuel, kerosene, natural gas, propane, and then all the different numbered fuel oils, 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, as well as other fuel oil, which allows for blends of different types of fuel oil that might not be the standard number 4 blend. And then there's an opportunity as well for other, where you could specify if it's not in this list, but it's also a heating fuel to do that. And we'll provide a little more details on how that specification will work later. And so heating fuel, though, excludes diesel fuel, motor gasoline, wood and wood-derived fuels, and solid waste. Who are heating fuel providers? Heating fuel providers are anyone delivering a heating fuel in Maryland, whether based in Maryland or not. So what that means is if you're a provider in Virginia, in Delaware, Pennsylvania, DC, but you deliver to Maryland, you're going to need to report about your deliveries to Maryland. But again, this is focused on Maryland companies. MDE is going to create a simple registration form for heating fuel providers that are delivering in the state to do this reporting. And if you have a question of if you need to report, we'll handle it via that registration process to understand what fuels you're delivering and to what in Maryland. And so that will kind of shake out some of the edge cases that we know might arise. What's in quarterly reports? So as I mentioned, these heating fuel providers must provide quarterly reports to the department. And that's going to include monthly heating fuel delivery information aggregated by fuel type, and then split by the Maryland county where it's delivered to, and the sector receiving the heating fuel. And there's really 4 sector options: residential, commercial, industrial, and electric power, as well as other energy consuming sectors. And that's one where we'll need some more specificity about what the fuel is going to. In some cases, it might actually end up being put back into a residential, commercial, industrial, or electric power, or in others, we will actually develop a new subcategory in that other for kind of miscellaneous odd uses of heating fuel that aren't really well captured in the other, or in one of the other 4. An example of this would be some company A delivered 100,000 gallons of number 2 fuel oil to Baltimore County homes, which is part of the residential sector, and 200,000 gallons of number 2 fuel oil to Baltimore County commercial businesses, which is part of the commercial sector, for the month of February. And so that would be a report, 2 different entries in a report. And here's a little flowchart to try to help explain how this works. Are you delivering fuel for final sale or consumption in Maryland? Yes. Then, if you're not, then that fuel is not being used in Maryland. It is not included in this rule. But if you are, then the question, are you delivering heating fuel as we've just defined? If you're not, that's a non-heating fuel. For example, those vehicle fuels, not included. But if you are, then it's a question of what sector is it being used in or delivered to: the residential, commercial, industrial, electric power, or other energy consuming sector. And then once it's broken out by those 5 different options, the fuel type and the county being delivered to gets split again. So when will these reports be due? The first report would be due on June 1st, 2026. And the quarterly reporting would be the first quarterly report from January, February, and March of 2026. And then the second quarter of 2026 would be due September 1st for April, May, and June. And then July, August, and September would be due December 1st, and October, November, December would be due March 1st. And this is our first draft of a reporting template that we've put together. We're looking for your input on this as well, and we'll make further improvements as you provide that input. But this is the idea. There's it's a 2-tab spreadsheet right now, a setup tab and then a reporting tab. So I want to show you what the setup tab is here. First, you're going to enter the year and the quarter you're reporting for, and then you'll provide the company name, address, and the company ID, which we'll provide to you when you do registration. And this is just a unique ID so that if there's any typos and names and addresses, we can make sure that we're accounting for this all well. And then we've built it so that there's all the counties in the state are listed, and you can go in and select yes or no, or really yes. The no is the default if you deliver to any of these counties. And then the fuels you deliver, all those ones I listed, and we will add additional ones based on the registration form. So if there's an additional fuel or additional details needed, we'll add that in to this form as well to help you pre-populate it. And then you'll write down the sectors you deliver to. And again, if there's additional sectors, we will expand this form. But once you've entered these kind of yes, no's, and you'll really have to do this setup once pretty quickly to get this whole thing set up, and then it'll be pretty natural after that. You can kind of use the same template and just update the dates But once that's set up, you'll be able to go into the next tab, which is the data entry tab, and it will pre-populate the fuels, the year, the quarter, and the month, as well as the sectors, and then the counties. And you see just Allegheny here, but there will be as many counties as you deliver to. So it will basically just be auto-populate all the fields you need to fill in based on that little setup tab that you previously selected. So this makes it pretty easy to have just the information you need for your company, and then for us to then capture that all in a standard format and collect that. If you don't have access to Microsoft Excel, we will provide a version of this in a CSV format that will be a little bit bulkier because it will be every possible combination. So it'll be a much larger file, but still workable if you don't have access to Excel. And we'll accept reporting in either of those two templates. So what if you're missing data? If you as the provider are missing data, then we'd ask you to provide an estimate of the heating fuel delivered that is at least as large as the amount that's actually being delivered. And if the provider does not report, MDE may estimate the fuel amount for that provider based on information MDE deems relevant to be at least as large as the amount actually delivered that should have been reported. So want to provide a little bit more additional guidance here on kind of how you provide some of these breakdowns. The first is to really go into those sectors, because I know for some of you, if you're working with if you're at a natural gas company, you're probably familiar with these sector breakdowns that are coming right out of the EIA's current reporting on this. But if you're working in some of the delivered fuels, it might be newer for you. And so we want to provide a little bit of guidance on how those sectors are broken down. In general, the residential sector is single-family dwellings, mobile homes, multifamily dwellings that are individually metered, as well as mastered metered apartment buildings, aka multifamily dwellings as well, even if they're metered together, things of that nature. The commercial sector is broad. It's many of the things we think about of being the commercial sector: offices, hotels, restaurants, recreational facilities, retail stores, schools and universities, wholesale stores, houses of worship, healthcare facilities, warehouses, government agencies and their buildings, transportation centers, non-manufacturing military installations, and other things of that nature. Next is the industrial sector. It includes agriculture, construction, forestry, manufacturing, mining, oil and gas extraction. And I'll note that there are some commercial businesses that might otherwise be commercial, but really the business is a commercial business, but when you're delivering to their facility, it's a manufacturing facility that would get lumped in the industrial sector. And the same goes for the next sector, which is electric power. So electric power is electricity or electricity and heat for sale to the public, and it's generally regulated electric utilities and non-regulated electricity generators. And then finally, other energy consuming sectors, you'll need to specify to MDE what's being included in these other sectors, and we'll actually add these as subcategories to the other energy consuming sectors in the reporting template if they don't belong in one of the other four. And so this, again, is just to make sure that we're properly categorizing and cataloging where all this fuel is going in the state. So what if you deliver a biofuel or some other blended fuel? How do you report it? When you register with the department as a heating fuel provider, you'll be able to specify more details on the fuel types for addition to the reporting template as a subset of that biofuel category. So for example, you deliver a B20 and a B100. Those are different. Again, stepping back, we're going to be using this as part of our emissions inventory. So we need to know the differences in emissions from those two different fuels. And so that's why we'll ask a little bit more about the content about those fuels. You'll need to provide details to the department about the fuel, its blending content, and its attributes in order to register it. And with that, we've covered the core of what this reporting, the heating fuel program is going to be all about. We look forward to you submitting your initial feedback and questions through the Q&A and discussion today, but also this feedback form, which we're going to drop in the chat now. And so you can go in and fill that form out. It's pretty broad and also has an open response section. So you don't have to think of it all right now. But we welcome your feedback by the end of day next Friday, so that we can kind of start collating and thinking about all this feedback you've got and take that into account as we move forward. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, we know that there are providers in Maryland delivering alternative fuels and biofuels. And so one of the other pieces of this is doing the emissions accounting for alternative fuels. So if you haven't been already, we encourage you to join our alternative fuels working group to discuss emissions accounting for alternative fuels. You can sign up in the link in the chat that Mustafa just dropped. Thanks, Mustafa. And we look forward to continuing that discussion in that separate pathway. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Cameron.
Thanks, Zach. So we'll now turn it over to the Q&A session. So for that, I'll read out loud some of the questions we've received so far in the Q&A, and we will answer as many questions as we can get to before moving on to the discussion portion. And just a reminder, to submit questions for the Q&A, you'll need to click on the activities button, which is found in the bottom right corner of the screen. It shows 9 dots in a square. So Zach, we got a lot of great questions. And the first one that we got was, would an entity delivering to itself, such as a municipal facility using waste oil on site to heat a building, need to register and report?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's maybe a non-standard delivery of a heating fuel. And so that's the kind of thing we'd probably want to get a little bit more details about how that's working and where that fuel might otherwise be accounted for in the whole system. So that's the kind of piece we would get to in the registration form. So if there's a question here of, am I a heating fuel provider? I've got this kind of unique thing where I'm taking some other fuel that probably is already getting reported by a different provider and using that, then we might say that is not included. Or we might say, yes, that is. That's the kind of thing we would deal with in the registration process. So I don't have a definitive answer at this point, but that's our kind of approach for some of these edge cases, is we'll handle that in the registration process and provide that clarity then. But for most cases, it's thinking about kind of in the scale, it's all about delivery for final sale or consumption in Maryland. And so that's, if it's gone from the rack, and then it's down to a third party that's aggregating it, and then finally in the truck to delivery to a home for delivered fuels. That's really, that truck to the home is where we're talking about delivery for final sale or consumption. If it goes to that truck and then half that load ends up going out to another state, we don't actually want to know about half that load going out to another state. That's not part of the delivery for final sale or consumption in Maryland. And so that's the kind of idea that we're trying to get at here.
Yeah. So
Thanks, Zach.
I think,
And so we received another question. Somebody asked, can Zach review the biofuel section again?
Sure thing. I'm assuming it's this section. And if you have more questions after we go through it now, feel free to put them in the feedback form or when we get to the discussion, but probably will be a feedback form moment. If you're delivering a biofuel, there's a whole variety of, we have kind of biofuel defined as a heating fuel type, but there's a variety. When we think about doing emissions accounting for our greenhouse gas inventory, we need to know the difference between the biofuels in terms of their emissions. And so you might have a different emissions profile between a B20 biofuel and a B100 biofuel for heating. And so we want to have that kind of distinguishment in this reporting. And so we'll ask, as you do registration, to help work us through what are the fuels you deliver. And for some of these ones where it might not be the standard assumption of an emissions factor that we'll generally use, we kind of use standard emissions factors for all these fuels from the EPA. And if you're not going to use one of those standard factors because you're saying, well, I have something different, then we'll work through in this registration process all the documentation and to show that, well, this is a different emissions factor that should be accounted for my fuels. And the kind of some of the processing for these biofuels we're doing through our alternative fuels working group. And that's where we are really trying to use that working group to say, what's the life cycle emissions of some of these alternative fuels like biofuels and hydrogen and biomethane. Those are some examples of what we've been working through in that alternative fuels working group. If you've not been joining that working group, but you'd like to, you can sign up in the link we put in the chat, and you can also go back and watch. We put the recordings of the last 2 sessions. You haven't missed that much. We've been only 2 sessions into that, but the recordings from the last 2 sessions are available on our YouTube page, and you can email us, or we can actually maybe drop the link for the YouTube page if anybody wants that. So just let us know if you've not seen those. But hopefully that answers the question there about what on the kind of reviewing this biofuel section.
Thanks, Zach. So the next question that we received is, would green hydrogen produced and consumed in Maryland for heating require reporting?
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, that is delivery of a heating fuel in Maryland. It does require reporting for this process. But again, if you're saying it's a green hydrogen, it might have a different emissions factor than you might otherwise use for hydrogen. So we'll want to know some more characteristics about that fuel and make sure that we can put that information in for you as a provider, so that when we're characterizing it in our emissions inventory and future regulatory programs, like we have that data squared away. So the answer is yes, it would be. Whether it's produced here or not, it's all about for final sale or consumption here in Maryland.
Thanks, Zach. So we'll probably give it another minute or two. We don't have any other questions right now in the Q&A, but we'll just pause right here, let anybody else trickle in a question if they have any before we move on to the discussion portion. So just 1 minute to put any other Q&A that you may have in the Q&A that you would like Zach to answer. All right, seeing no more questions coming in, we'll move on to the discussion portion. So for that portion, what we're going to do is you can raise your hand to come on camera and use your microphone, and we'll call on people with raised hands to hear your feedback. And we ask that you just please introduce yourself by affiliation before making any comments. If you would prefer not to say your feedback live, we will be sending the feedback form where you can provide your feedback in a written format. You can also submit your feedback in the Q&A feature if you would prefer to provide written feedback as well. So with that, if you would like to come off the mic and provide feedback to us, you can just raise your hand and I will go in order in the queue.
And for those of you that are maybe new to Google Meet, the raise hand function is in the bottom tray. There's a little hand right next to the hang up button. So don't hang up, but make sure you click the raise hand and it'll create a queue for us and we'll call on folks from there.
All right, so I see Derek, Craig, you raised your hand, so I'm going to send you a request and you should be able to accept the request and then be able to come off the mic and camera. All right, so Derek, you should be able to come off the mic.
Okay. I'm sorry if it's loud in the background. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And we just ask that you introduce yourself with your affiliation before you make any comments. Thank you.
Sorry about that. My name is Derek Craig. I'm with Chesapeake Utilities. I'm here at the BWI airport, so I apologize. But I just wanted to ask, I had a problem with the link connecting at the beginning. But just to confirm, it's all heating oil. So I'm assuming propane is included in that as well?
Yes, propane is included. And Derek, we'll be able to send the slide. We'll definitely send the slides around afterwards, so you can always review the information.
Thank you very much. That's all I needed.
Certainly follow up on this.
All right, and if anybody else would like to, provide feedback to us during this discussion portion or ask any other questions, we'll give you another minute or two. But if nobody else would like to do that, we can always end this session a little bit early, but we just want to provide this opportunity for you all. All right, Lisa, I saw you raise your hand, so I just sent your request. You should be able to accept it and then be able to come off the mic and just introduce yourself with your affiliation, please.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys diving in.
And the mic button should be toward the left of your Google Meet screen.
Sorry. So I was the one that asked the question about the waste oil, and just to kind of clarify the situation at two of the landfills in Baltimore County, and I'm with Baltimore County, Maryland. At two of our landfills, we have locations where people can drop off all kinds of stuff, including used motor oil, and most of it just gets handled as waste, but some of it we basically take and use to heat our existing buildings there on site where we have a waste oil furnace. So it's being diverted from the waste stream to provide heat. So is that going to be something that needs to be reported this way besides through BEPS?
Louisa, thanks for the question. That's a good one. And we will take that feedback into consideration as we move forward and try to provide you additional clarity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Louisa. And if anybody else would like to come off the mic, just remember to raise your hand and we'll go from there. But if not, we'll give another minute or two, but we can end the session early if nobody else has any comments they'd like to make or questions they would like to ask. All right, so last call for anybody that would like to ask a question or provide us feedback, but not seeing anybody raising their hand. So with that, we'll just end the session early this morning. So we will be sending a follow-up email, like Zach said, after today's webinar with a meeting summary, including the presentation slides and a feedback form. So please submit your feedback by May 23rd. If you have further questions, feel free to come to relevant future sessions and reach out to us at cleanheat.mde@maryland.gov, or you can also call 410-537-3890 if you have any other questions. You can also sign up for our communications list to receive updates from us regarding the policies, and future stakeholder sessions. And Mustafa just dropped that link in the chat. So again, thank you all for attending this morning's feedback session, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.